All right. Are we now unmuted?
We are, yeah.
All right.
So
Look at Sarah, right on time. All right. So we will, as usual, start our work session with board and commission interviews. Dana Cooley is here with us interviewing for the library board. If you'll just come to the microphone and just tell us briefly why you'd like to serve on the library board, and then we may ask a question or two.
Okay, great. Hi, thank you very much for having me here. Name is Dana Cooley, been part of the Webster Grooves community almost 25
Can I
years.
stop you a second? We go that way just slightly. So you're
Yeah.
really, people here on Zoom can hear you in the
Wonderful.
microphone.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So I've been part of Webster Groves for a really long time, 25 years. Many years ago, spent a lot of time with the Webster Groves Baseball and Softball League. And really after COVID realized I had stopped really being a part of the community. A lot of my interests had been part of work or other boards that I'm part of in that way. And so really started to think about how can I get back involved in my community, and started to look at what was available out there. And I saw that the library had an opening on their board. And I feel like the library is a community gathering place. It should be a place that everyone has access to. And it's a place that people can come when they need help, whether it's access to computers or to a book or to just a safe place to be able to go and meet others in the community. So it felt like a good connection point for me. And it doesn't hurt that I'm an avid book reader, either. So I've got a heart for the place as well.
Right. Are there questions? I'm going to ask you one question because it is the agenda item of agenda items for the library board, and I do serve as liaison. I think you're aware that there have been some attempts to change what can be circulated, limit access to some books. Do you have any thoughts on your role or the role of the library board in that?
Yeah, my understanding would be we'd be setting policies and procedures for how to comply with those regulations without, in my opinion, reducing access to books that are available within the library. So it would be just about understanding the limits of that, understanding what others are doing in the communities around us, and then trying to put those policies into place to be able to follow.
All right, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the time.
And you will hear shortly from our city clerk, Katie Nakazana.
Great. Thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. While we are on this, Janie Worthington, who is also a member of the library board, she served one term and wishes to be reappointed. She is a very active member. Would we like to do that? I see shaking of heads. All right. Well, look at us move right along to update. No, review the regular agenda. Does anyone have anything on the regular agenda that they'd like to talk about? All right, we have reviewed that then. Let's start with updates. We'll just, as usual, start down there with you.
Sure. So I don't think we've had a historic preservation meeting since we last met, but I don't think I gave a full update last time. So two things on that. One, I know that the Ozark Theater has been a big topic that's come up on historic preservation for that. We talked about that as a commission. They are ready to assist the property owner with whatever direction she might want to go in. It's already on the local historic register, so it would be getting it on the national if that's what she chooses to do. And the commission is ready to help her if that's what the road that she decides to go through. It's a lengthier process than getting on the local. So they could help with resources with that. And then there had also been some questions about the general process of how the historic districts work and how you can maybe expand those. So just very briefly, basically the people that live in those districts would come together and decide that that's what they wanted to do. And then there is some research that needs to be done that would need to be funded by them as well, unless they want to do it themselves, which some areas do. But the HPC would be available to kind of help and guide with that process. So people who have questions about are welcome to come to one of those meetings. So that's HPC. Green Space Advisory Commission met yesterday and have a couple updates on that. One, the next EcoEd talk is on conservation planning, and Rhonda Burnett from the Missouri Department of Conservation will be at Webster University Thursday, June 22nd. They're doing a meet and greet. This is open to the public, meet and greet at 6:30, and then the talk at 7. It should be really good. It's at Webster in the Sciences building that it's kind of there in the middle of campus. And then for council and staff are invited to a meeting that morning at Maypop and then like a walk around. So if council's interested in that, just let Carrie Coyne know to kind of coordinate that. That's the Eco Ed talk. But for everybody else, open to the public, 6:30 meet and greet, 7 o'clock talk on Thursday, the 22nd. And then we had the successful NOMO program in April, and they're already looking forward to the fall. And there will be a proposed Leave the Leaves program as well, which is similar but different. It's not for 1 month. It's just kind of, you just leave your leaves for the season, and it can be a spectrum. So if people want to rake them into their flower beds, or if they want to mulch them like they usually do and not do anything, or if people want to leave them completely, it's completely up to people, but it's kind of education on what the benefits are for leaving the leaves or leaving more of the leaves on your yard. And then the last thing I have is, as you know, Linda Green passed away. She was a very active green space member, and we wanted to let everyone know that there is a service memorial planned. We don't have the exact time, but it will be Saturday, June 24th at Lorraine Davis Park. And then we're looking into things like, planting an oak tree and other things to do to help her memory and also to continue projects that were important to her.
Great, thank you. Karen?
Parks and Rec has been busy. And speaking of No More April.
Yes.
So actually, there was conversation around No More April and what the feeling was with reference to its success or not. Of course, they were looking at the pros and the cons. It seems like the overall was that there was more positive than negative, but one of the challenges is that the catch up. Because the Parks and Rec guys have to now go back and catch up and mow 12 plus inches of grass. And then there's some concern about what type of a negative impact it may have had on the turf. And then the other is that there were several a bit of feedback from neighbors that many people took it to May. And so, and I've had that same complaint myself, because I've just noticed that where there's just yards where they didn't mow in April or May, and so that's something to think about. So but over and all, it's the thought was that the positives outweighed the negatives. There was discussion around policies on naming of the parks. Scott provided some examples of municipal policies from different municipalities locally and around the state. And he just asked that the board members would review those and be prepared to mark it up, make comments, and be prepared to come back and discuss it at the next meeting. They talked about a grant money request that Scott has made for about $400,000. If that money is rewarded, the city would need to contribute a 10% match from the city. That match could be in kind. Right now, it sounds like that would be used likely toward the Marshall and Brentwood area between the Gateway Greenway with native restoration, designed to stop water from getting to the creek. There were conversations around the pool, and some of the feedback with reference to Scott shared that that the council is leaning toward replacement. The overall feedback from the community has been that they would like to see replacement. However, there seems to be concern with the likelihood that we would push off, that if we pushed off if we delayed the indoor option, that, it might not get back on track. It might get pushed off and not get back on track. And so, and actually, one of the members shared that the feedback was that they're really cost neutral about it, that they would be willing to vote for whatever bond costs would take to accomplish getting indoor option. However, I brought up, and Scott shared too, that not only was there the concern with the initial expense of development for it, but the $200,000 shortfall annually for covering the expenses of it. So there was a pretty healthy conversation around that. And then finally, there was talk about water features at any of the parks. If we were coming back with that, Scott indicated that had really just proved too hard to maintain. So there was really at this time, no consideration for coming back with a water feature. And one of the gentlemen asked if there had been any type of a discussion around marketing it privately sponsored water features, where as different companies or what have you might be willing to sponsor for the advertising benefits of providing the maintenance for a water feature. And that's all I have. Oh, we did Planning Commission met last night. There were two items that were discussed. One was the Elm Avenue planning. They provided their final plan, and it was kind of funny. They felt that they were a little out of practice because they hadn't had much that they needed to do. But Mara did share that a lot of that's because we had many things that would have been previously bought before planning now can be done administratively, that are either and then go straight to council or what have you. So there's just hasn't been that much of a need lately, but that's all I have.
Can we go back to NOMO April really quick? Because I think there's been some confusion that this was enacted as a cost saving measure for the city. And it wasn't. Like, I
No.
mean, I think it's clear. I think we have to make clear. And I think this should be like, as we go into like the potential leaf thing and like where the parameters are for the city, I think would be helpful if they would devise that. But I think that there's been some confusion just based off of where we are budget wise, that the NOMO April was a cost saving measure rather than an environmental saving measure. So I just wanted to make that clear, because I've seen a lot of discussion and complaints recently about the city's mowing and what we did during the month of April going into the month of May.
I can talk a little bit about the parameters for the leaves
Yeah.
too. We did talk about that yesterday, and I know Jenny, you sent a follow-up email today, like just what the council's request would be, and it's a little bit different. Like we wouldn't be asking the city to change what they already do for leaves, and it's more.
And why don't we,
educational
and why don't we hold
environmental.
off on that until they're ready to actually make that request of us?
Yeah.
And then we can fully
Yeah.
discuss it.
And I would say that I didn't get a feeling that there was, and that may have been so that I'm not misstating what you said. I think you said that you have gotten feedback that they're okay, because even with the conversation that we had, it was clear that the objective was to promote pollinators and what have you. But one of the things that needed to be taken into consideration that Parks and Rec had to realize was that they didn't and they may have thought about it, I don't know, but then the catch up.
Yeah.
What was a little more challenging, I think, than maybe they envisioned that it would be.
Yeah.
So,
It's our first year doing it. There's gonna be some
exactly.
hiccups.
So, right, exactly.
David, do you have other? updates?
So Traffic Advisory Commission is working its way through its complete streets recommendations, which will probably be finalized here shortly. Additionally, they've already submitted a recommendation regarding parking restrictions in and around the high school / library, which is now currently working its way through staff. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up on that.
Yes, let's see, since we last were in council meeting, the BDC had their business coffee networking. It was wildly successful, I would say. 47 people in attendance. A lot of comments were gathered on Post-its and then documented in a list of items. And so there was a lot of feedback. Some of them were not just BDC comments, but related to other departments. And based on the success of that, they're looking to have more every 6 months. So the next one will be in August. And we'll be hearing from Mike today, and you can ask the chair more about that when he presents.
Great, thank you.
No updates, Mayor.
No boards or commission updates, but did want to mention that we had a chance, a few of us, to participate in the March Against Gun Violence on Sunday. And it was great to see so many folks turn out for that, and lots of community participation, great speakers, including our esteemed mayor. And just was really pleased with how that went, and had nothing to do with organizing it. So it was nice to just kind of be part of that, that crowd. Likewise, just have to say the art fair just seemed really wonderful this year, and it was hot, but it had to be considered a success considering the turnout and how well everything went, and that the rain held off till literally the last, the
10
last
minutes.
minute.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right, thank you.
I have no updates, Mayor.
Just a couple, Madam Mayor, and I'll tag on to the NOMO April discussion. And I want to thank Parks and Rec because they've worked very hard to catch up on the mowing. And there has been a lot of discussion regarding the purpose of it. And as Councilman Franklin said, it certainly was not a cost-saving measure. It was a recommendation from some of our boards and commissions. And, it was a lot of fun for many community members to participate in. But what I wanted to share is that having seasonal workers has been very difficult, the hiring. So if anybody knows of seasonal workers, perhaps high school kids, whoever wanting to mow, earn some money, we are definitely hiring. There's signs in the parks. They've got the QR codes on them, but everything will get caught up. And again, a huge thanks to the Parks and Rec staff because they've really been working hard. Juneteenth. Thursday, June 15th, everyone has invited us for the city's second Juneteenth celebration. It will be at Ivory Crockett Park, and the Red and Black Brass Band will be performing. It'll be a ton of fun. So 6:30 p.m. if I didn't say that. And then it is almost parade time. The parade application deadline is coming up June 16th at noon. So if folks haven't gotten in their parade applications, it is definitely time to do that. And city staff have been working with all the folks in terms of community days. Have met with Lions, and glad to see it back at Eden this year. And so really gearing up for a fun time.
Great, thank you very much. I just have a couple of things myself. The Charter Review Advisory Board continues to meet. Their survey is out and in the field. I would encourage all of my colleagues, however you use social media, to blast that out if you can, word of mouth. They have over 300 responses right now, but I think they have ambitions to be like the pool survey response. So they've got a ways to go. They have invited all members of boards and commissions, plus the Webster Grove School Board, to a listening session that they will be having later this month, and are in the process of planning some that are open to anyone who might want to participate. So we can look for those later this summer.
Hey, Laura,
yeah.
if I could you just explain to the public, the role of that commission or that board, and how this council has no,
Yeah.
because I think
So,
there's
yeah,
been some confusion about that.
One of the things that's come up certainly in social media is this idea that somehow this council is asking for things like a raise, a change in ballot initiative process. We're not asking for a single thing. We've asked because the voters instructed us to ask this Charter Review Advisory Board to go through the charter and decide what they believe might need to be changed, and then make those recommendations to us. In their process, they have spent several months going through the charter line by line, comparing it to other charters, comparing it to a model charter, and have come up with a set of things that they think they might want to consider sending to us, but they want public feedback on those. And so that's where we are right now. Anything that is discussed in the survey is something the Charter Review Advisory Board is considering, but has not decided upon, because they're very clear that they want to understand what the residents of Webster Groves want to say.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And Arts Commission met this morning. Burr Oak is on for this year as of my hearing today for July 14th. So put that on your calendar. It's always a really good evening in Webster Groves. And I just wanted to echo Sarah's thanks to the people who, including Clark O'Tailing, who's here with us today, who organized the Wear Orange March and Day. It was very nice to see so many community members out. All right, we are to our topics, and I believe we are starting with an update on the Business Development Commission. And Mike Pincus, Chair of that commission, is here with us. And thank you for being here, Mike. We would love to hear about all the good work you're doing. And I will just echo what Pam said. Congratulations on a great event. It was
Thanks.
certainly well attended.
It was great. We were excited about it. We got good feedback. We'll talk about that a little bit, but we're going to continue to do it twice a year. So it's great for us to get to know some of the newer business members that we didn't know, other people supporting the business community that were there, and really just getting people together to share feedback and share ideas. So, and we got some great feedback from it too. We have a little slideshow. Thanks, Jenny.
Oh.
That's just introducing me. So I know most of you all, but my name is Mike Pincus. I'm the chair of the Business Development Commission. We can go ahead and do the next slide.
I can't get it to slide.
You're okay, Jenny. Good deal. So it's been a while since I've been in here, since we've kind of caught everybody up to speed on what we've been doing with Business Development Commission. 2021, we hosted a business roundtable, and that was basically to get feedback from the business owners coming out of COVID and just all the challenges that we've dealt with, supply chain issues, labor force, restrictions with just day-to-day operations. And then we conducted a 2022 business survey, which was still related to that. Pulled some ideas out of that, the feedback that we got. There were common trends that weren't specific to, a one-off certain business here or there. But labor issues, as Dr. Peoples just said, are still going on and have been a common trend in business. And so out of that, we launched the Work in Webster Groves website. I think it's pretty successful. We're still working on continuing to advertise it, continuing to get the word out so that businesses know that it is an active job board for them, but it's free for them to use. We want to get more feedback on it too, to see if people are getting placed, jobs placed from that job board. But ultimately, if we can do anything to help out our business owners and help out to fill those labor gaps, that's what we want to do. And that's what we've been working on there. So last year in the fall, we put together an event, Business Bingo, which was fun, but was also there to kind of get the word out. Certain businesses, we had, bingo card, very easy, go around, visit the business, figure out a little riddle to figure out where to go. There was a map on the back. And then we had a reception at Llewellyn's as well. So bringing everybody together that were participants. I talked to a lot of business owners during the event as we were dropping cards off around town. And the feedback that I got while it was going on was that it was nice. People were coming in that hadn't been in the door before. And that's feedback that we get all the time. Everybody kind of gets in their groove and they know where they're going as far as, dropping kids off at school or going to work or going to wherever they go shopping. But, they might have a place 2 or 3 blocks down the road that's been there for 5 years that they had no idea existed. So getting people in the door and just, teaching them who's there and trying to get more, more sales for retail, but then also for the other businesses that were involved. So, and then the coffee event that we did a couple of weeks ago, council member Bliss was just telling you about that, and I'll go into a little bit more details on it on the next slide. But good event where we did have a lot of people show up. We tried to get around and personally invite almost every business that we could that had a physical footprint. I think that was beneficial, and we'll do that again. New businesses, old businesses, ones that are involved, that aren't as involved, but we invited people out to give us ideas on what we could do to use our American Rescue funds that we have earmarked for business development. Out of that, we did have a few major themes that came out. There were still a few one-offs, and there were some that aren't necessarily related to Business Development Commission, but we'll push them along to various other commissions. That way we can get feedback up the chain to where it needs to go. But, just continued support for the business community, opportunities to connect business owners to each other and friends of the business community that maybe didn't know each other. That was really great, really fun. We learned from each other, did some networking, and had some of the business owners that wanted to get more involved with some of the boards and commissions as well, which was great. So we had support and interest in wayfinding and putting together a citywide business map that we're working on right now. And that's something that we're actively working on, but kind of working on a QR code to tie in Explore Webster Grove's website. And then also to come up with some sort of almost like a mall wayfinder is kind of how we envision it. Where again, if I walk into business A and I want to know what type of retail there is as far as like a women's boutique around, that's something that, you know, that wayfinder should be able to give them. So we're still in works with it, trying to figure it out. But that's something we've been talking about the last few months and then look for feedback on. Support and need for a dedicated business contact liaison at City Hall. I know city staff has done a great job supporting us. And that's something that we've continued to hear from the business community as far as working on some sort of economic development advisor, somebody that can help support us and help support the business community as well to just improve it, drive more people in the doors and generate more tax revenue. So pedestrian safety and crosswalks in retail districts was something that was brought up, especially around the crossroads area with increased traffic flow there. That was something that got brought up in other areas too, kind of over by off of yes, yeah, thank you. So that's something that, you know, that we'll kick along to, you know, traffic commission as far as seeing what we can do to help that. And then improve trash receptacles and beautification as well. Potentially doing something with micro grants or putting trash receptacles in some areas that are not in the special taxing districts where they've went in and done that. You know, for example, like the Zeta Del area, which is off of Marshall and Summit there. So those are some good ideas that I think came out of it and good things that we can do to just help improve the community and improve the businesses that that we support. So upcoming goals of projects, we did partner with Sustainability Community on the Green Dining Program. And so that's coming up and they'll give more information on that. The citywide business map, I explained a little bit about, and we're still in works on that, but that's something I would say over the next couple of months or so, we'll have more information on and hopefully get those QR codes out. We kind of want to just do it as a little, you know, sticky for the window, something that it's easy, but it's not invasive where, you know, we don't want it to be too big or, you know, change people's facade of their businesses, but we recognize that we want to get more people going around. Going around and exploring a little bit and supporting other businesses as well. So that's been a positive feedback from that. And then the biannual business coffees, we'll keep pulling ideas out of that and keep bringing them together and then using that for our future agenda items to support the business community. So that's pretty much all I had. And so if there's any questions or anything that you'd like to talk to me about or anything like that, feel free.
Questions for me?
I will just say thank you, Mike. I mean, you all have, I know, been at this for a while, and it seems like just within the last 18 months or so, some of the things that have been talked about really have come to fruition. So thank you for that. It's
Thanks
really
so much.
good work.
Yeah, I'm really happy with what we've done over the last 18 months or so. I mean, I think we've had a lot more action than what we've had, you know, the couple of years before that. I've been on Business Development Commission for a long time, so it's fun to see where it's went. So
Thanks for looking at the city as a whole. I really appreciate that. You know, you mentioned Zeta Del and some other areas. So I think that's great to look at
absolutely.
the whole community and appreciate the work that you're doing and really interested to hear what happens with the green dining initiative.
Thanks.
All right, Mike, thank you.
All right.
You're welcome to stay, but we also understand if you'd like to sneak on out of here. All right, next on our topics is the council work process, which I'm laughing at a little bit because we just need to figure this out. So we are doing this until we figure it out. And one of the reasons we're talking about it now for people who might be tuning in or in the audience is, you know, as we finish up the budget, we have this place now where we might actually have time to discuss some more things. We will have that work session availability, and we will especially have it on July 5th. We're scheduled to spend the work session on our strategic planning process. And so hopefully we will get close to the end of that. We know that what we want to do work session wise should be consistent with the strategic plan, but we also understand that there's got to be some process involved. You know, so far we've worked with a very informal way of doing it. And I think some of the members of council are more satisfied with how that's worked than others. So we're going to talk this through. And then you all got a memo. And also some forms from Dr. Peoples and a beautiful flow chart from Dr. Peoples, which, makes my memo seem so boring. But I think we really have three things that we need to decide. How many council members need to agree on an item for us to officially place it on the agenda? What form should the request take? Most of you who gave me feedback are pretty confident that we need something written just so everyone has some advance notice. If that turns out to be the case in our discussion, we certainly could adapt the boards and commission form. And then Dr. Peoples and staff have worked on the commission meeting request process. You've got 2 forms plus this flow chart, and we'll let Dr. Peoples work us through the flow chart when we get to that question. So I'm going to start with, what is the council's preference on what's the number of people that need to be interested in a particular issue for us to schedule time for it?
I think 2 or 3. So not just 1 and not a full quorum.
I think 2 is sufficient.
I can go with 2.
Go ahead, Emerson.
Yeah, I think every council member has the right to be heard on a subject matter. I think they should have the opportunity to present it to council. They should be ready to answer questions. They should be ready to present the facts. They should be ready to accept, we don't want to move forward with this. But, and I think I shared this with on my comment, is that my first year on the board, on the council, all I heard was, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. And I don't want to hear that. If council member has a project or a thought they want to present to the council, they should be given the opportunity to display it, to tell it. Now, after the information is shared, if the council don't want it to go any further, I think it's time, at that time, we can say, we're not going to do it.
So I want to distinguish between bringing things up in issues and updates and scheduling work session time. Any member of the council at any time can say, hey, I want to talk about front facing garage doors during issues and updates. What we're really talking about is taking a chunk of the valuable work session time we have and deciding what's the criteria for putting that on there. And I just want to make sure we're thinking about both of those things and not just one or the other.
So like an individual could bring up a topic in a work session, and not in a work session, like in an update. And ask if we went with 2, ask if there's somebody else that would be interested in basically like seconding that to go on to the work.
And then it would be scheduled again,
Right.
depending on what number we come up with.
Right.
And I might be getting too much into the minutia, but it seems to me that there's a difference between a recommendation that's coming from our boards and commissions versus a recommendation or a request for discussion from an individual council member. So for instance, let's just say it's about mowing lawns, which is not on anyone's agenda as a commission right now, but maybe a council member is concerned about it. I think that to me would say, okay, 2 sufficient, but from a board and commission, I would think if the recommendation's already been proposed by them, adopted by them, I would say 3.
Okay, let's hold off on boards and commissions because I agree with you. They're 2 different things. Let's also note that there will be some things that get scheduled in work sessions simply because staff needs us to do something or has something that we've asked them to work on that they want to bring back to us. So again, this is not going to be fully 100% discretionary on the part of the council. Sarah, you have not weighed in yet at all.
No, I've been thinking about that, but I like the idea of somebody kind of moving to do it and have, I think that makes sense as a process to
I'm sorry, you want what now?
have 2 people,
Have a
basically, to have
motion.
somebody kind of like make a motion to add something to it. I mean, whether informally or formally, and having a second to that makes sense. I think that would be sufficient to me in terms of number of people.
So if I'm going to summarize what I've heard so far, we have Emerson's wish for any individual to be able to do this. And then the broader consensus beyond seems to be that you would be required to have a second person. So the number would be 2. or we'll get to the boards and commissions.
And Mayor, I want to say,
Please.
if I have something I want to bring to the council to discuss, I should put the time in to research it and see what all the facts are. Most questions I have, I'll either call Dr. Peoples, I'll call Eric, I'll
Right.
call Katie, I'll even we talked a lot,
Yeah.
talk to you. And once I get the understanding, it's no issue for me any longer. So I like to do the groundwork before I bring something to the commission, to the council, to make sure it's relevant to what we're doing.
Well, and I thank you. I very much appreciate that because I do think that it's a good reminder that we all need to understand the issue we're bringing forward. I mean, I know Mara's sitting in her usual spot back there, but I think I send Mara 3 or 4 emails a week with different kinds of questions. So yes, there is some responsibility for us to figure out whether it really is something we even want to try and schedule work session time for.
And
in
I'll say most of
advance.
the time, it's my lack of understanding
Yeah.
of what needs to be done. So
Well, I think part of that is maybe we can engage with each other a little bit more to ask the question when it comes up that, may validate the request without having that person to do a presentation.
Okay, so I think, I think the consensus is at least 2. Or am I right about that? I don't think we need a formal vote on any of this. This is just sort of our internal process. The second question then on this is to the extent to which we want this written versus just a verbal understanding. I'm actually going to speak first here. I think it would be easier for myself and for Katie and for Dr. Peoples if we had a written description of what it is that somebody really wanted to go on the agenda. Just in terms of, I think all of you have seen it at one point or another, there is a calendar that goes through the end of the calendar year that schedules for us what is in a work session, and to try and judge the amount of time, to try and judge that, I think would be helpful to have something written.
I agree. I think writing it and submitting it, I think would make the most sense. One, because I think it would also assist the staff in being able to clarify what it is they need to present on. They can then go back to the individual council members that's making the request to clarify. That way we're not wasting anyone's time or resources as we go forward.
All right, somehow this is seeming easier as if we haven't talked about this over and over for the
It's
next
because
last
we've
year.
been having one-on-one conversations about it and not been able to talk about it
Yeah, okay.
altogether.
All right, well then I'm gonna suggest then I'll come up with a modified version of the format for boards and commissions and make it, the emphasis is on simple, just so we can all do that, and I'll circulate that. I'm gonna turn this over to Dr. Peoples now, so she can walk us through the flow chart for boards and commissions, and then we can make whatever decisions we need to make in that arena.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we do indeed have a planning calendar that the directors, Katie, myself, that we plan out through the end of the year. It does move quite a bit. It's a fluid calendar, but it's important because it allows us that time for staff to have to work on projects as well as to make sure that there are items that council, obviously would like on the agenda. And it allows us really to plan that time as well, because you all know our meetings are pretty packed. And so we try to limit the number of items in the work session and on the agenda. In terms of the 2 forms, and Jenny, I think you can put them up. We've created 2 forms that council received some time ago. There's a request to be on an agenda form and a funding request form. So the request to be on agenda is twofold. And again, we are just piloting these forms, so they will get better as we go along. But in terms of the request to be on an agenda, what we've seen so far is from a board or commission where it's a policy recommendation that the board or commission, they've worked hard. They've just come up with some policy recommendations that they would like to present to council. Other times we found that boards or commissions simply have just asked to be on a council agenda because they'd like to provide an update. You all have started something with the updates, which is a great thing, but it's difficult for me to schedule them just to do an update and to make the best use of council time when we're here. So it's really serving those 2 purposes. And then there's the funding request form, which is pretty self-explanatory. But as you know, boards, that's okay, Jenny, it's fine. We're good. Can you work on finding the flow chart?
Yes, I have the flow chart.
All right. Just pop that up.
Okay.
So as boards and commissions are getting more involved, there of course are funding requests and they're advisory. And so those funding requests come up through staff and ultimately go to council for approval. And so having them describe what they would like to purchase or what the money is going to, I found to be very helpful. So that's that second form. But in terms of the flow chart and how those policy decisions get to council.
Can we pause
Yes,
1 second?
Absolutely.
Just want to note that the intention is that we will still have every board and commission do an annual update. This is beyond the scope of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing that the boards and commissions have wanted to share their updates. There's certainly nothing negative in that at all. It's just a matter of time. And are their updates timely for council? And a lot of those you'll get emails on, memos, different manners. And the other way I also say for those boards and commissions, you all are the face as the liaison. And so you share your updates just as you did today from those boards or commissions. So when boards and commissions decide on a policy that they would like to bring forth, I've found that I need a lot more information to be able to weigh in on the policy. And I will just start out from the start to say that any policy recommendation made by a board or commission comes to council. There's not a point in this process where council is not informed of what that policy recommendation is. But in order for me to take it to council, it needs to be properly vetted and there needs to be the information so you all can make an informed decision. So that first step there, board commission chair submits the written policy recommendation to the staff liaison. The policy recommendations, excuse me. So the board or commission that's been working together, they will submit that written policy recommendation. Thank you, Jenny. To the staff liaison. The staff liaisons are usually the directors, but not always. Sometimes these are other levels of staff. And so those policy recommendations should reflect the agreements of a majority of the board or commission, be submitted in writing, and they do not need to be submitted on the meeting request form. It can come through an email. We're not trying to be terribly prescriptive about this. The staff liaison then coordinates with the department director or chief to discuss the policy recommendation. And of course, the liaison may be the department director or chief, and they in turn would work with the appropriate staff to really discuss the policy recommendation and any impacts that it could possibly have on the department. That department director then submits a recommendation to me in response to the request. And at that time, they'll also provide me with information on what the request is. The department director's recommendation needs to reflect alignment with city, state, and federal requirements. You know, often we have recommendations from boards or commissions that sound like a good idea, and they often are good ideas, but they conflict with what we're legally able to do. So I need that information from the department directors, along with feasibility and cost from the department perspective. I will then review that policy recommendation and the department's memo at that time. If the recommendation impacts other departments, then I will request that those other departments also weigh in. And I think a good example of this is the Traffic Advisory Committee's North Elm road diet that was recommended. They've done a ton of work on it. And so when I received the recommendation, it of course had the police department's recommendation on as well, but it did not take into account the fire department or public works. And that's incredibly important to consider. So I then asked those two departments to provide a recommendation on what the proposal was. So I then take all of that information and then make my recommendation. Jen, if you'd scroll down a little bit, please. So when I provide my recommendation, I will provide all of those documents back to that board or commission chair so that they have the full load of documents, the memos to read. And we're not talking about a ton of paper here, but most of the memos are just, one page. So that they will have that, and they will have my recommendation, which will either be, yes, I support this, or no, I don't support this. Here's why. And I may be neutral. There may not be an impact. And so really that policy decision is, not necessarily of consequence in terms of staff or conflicting with federal laws, something like that. So if it is supported or neutral, I will then work with staff, with the mayor on the calendar to see when that would be timely to be in front of council. If I do not support it, again, all of those memos and that information will go back to that board or commission chair along with the council liaison and the department director. It will then be up to that board or commission to have that discussion amongst themselves to see if they want to move forward with asking to be in front of council. And if they would like to do that, then it's up to council to have that discussion. And this is where your 2 members, 3 members, 4 members comes into play. It's up to council at that point in time to decide if they want that item on the agenda. So I will pause there. That's a lot of information. It's not as heavy or hefty as it sounds. It's a pretty easy flow, I think, after we work through a couple.
So is everyone clear on what this? Thank you, by the way, for creating the chart and setting it out clearly. I think not only is it going to help us, it's going to help all of our leadership on boards and commissions as well. Does anybody have any concerns or questions about the processes that's been laid out here?
I have one question, like what at the end, how is the determination of council or, the final determination communicated back to is that done by like, the council liaison is done by city manager, like, what is that mechanism?
So thank you. And that is not a piece that's on there. I would be happy to communicate it back to that board or commission. However, that council liaison may want to do that as well. So I would reach out to that council liaison and see how we'd like to go about it. And in some instances, I suspect it may be that I'm preferred to do it.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think fundamentally, one of the things we have to understand is I think when we talk about liaisons, we're talking a lot about one way of this communication, right? Not only is our job to communicate what's going on in the commission, it's our job to communicate to the commission what council is doing. So I would say fundamentally, that is the responsibility of a liaison with, whatever support we might want from the city manager. I mean, that's my personal view.
I'm comfortable with that. I just think that I want to be clear on like roles and who's doing what. And I
So
want
that
to
it
make
gets
sure
there.
that the board or commission is getting a clear decision and not kind of left open. But I'm happy to have the liaison be that person who does that. That makes sense. With the
right.
support of the city.
Any other comments? I hear you're breathing, David. Go for it.
This might be getting into the weeds a little bit, but in regards to, let's say, the city manager does not support a policy recommendation from X board, and the board itself elects not to move forward and present it to council. A council member is not prohibited from submitting an individual meeting request form to get it on the agenda.
So I've certainly let other council members weigh in, but in my opinion, no, council members can always present, but that's where your 2 or 3 to get it on an actual agenda would come into play.
Yeah, and it could get tricky too, right? Like, cause I think the North Elm Road diet is a good example. Because right now, the city staff, it's not supported. And say the Traffic Advisory Commission elects not to proceed with it, but I myself think it's a good idea. Do I then need 2 votes to get it on the agenda, or would I need 3? Because it originally came from.
Okay, so I think that's the question we have to answer, right? So unsupported at this point, that's everything else, right? We have agreement on. It's when we get to be here. What happens with the unsupported? Whether the commission decides to submit it or whether a council member decides to submit it, my personal view is it should have the same number because it has been something that staff has said for whatever reason, we can't support this policy. The question, so that's question 1, is it going to be the same if it's member and just the commission coming back? And the second question is, what's the threshold?
And just to clarify, this is only in the case of an unsupported recommendation.
Yes, supported stuff's all coming to us automatically.
Or something that hasn't been, like, we're not going back to the original question about if it comes up in issues and updated.
No, we're not going back to,
Just making sure I'm.
yeah. Please don't make me go back to that. David, you had suggested in an earlier conversation that 3 might be, if it's an unsupported, that 3 might be a threshold.
That would be my recommendation. And the only reason I say that is because I get my cues from the Supreme Court. They'll take cert with 3.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Unless it's on the.
This is a rule that predates anyone currently on the Supreme Court by generations. So Anybody have another number besides 3? Other comments?
I mean, I'm okay with 3. I'm also okay with 2, just so it's always the same and we don't have to figure out like, what are we, is it 2, is it 3?
I think 3 seems logical, if we have 2, then we're kind of going in circles. So at least if we have another person in favor, it seems to be, showing a little bit more interest on council's point of view, that it's worthy.
Well, and it's not that there's 3 people in favor of the item itself. It's
It's
there's
just
3
that
people in
favor of hearing about
discussing,
it.
yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
I think I would land with 4, especially because you're basically overruling staff recommendations, which to me is a big deal. Like, I don't know that that would happen very often. I kind of want to say that the majority of council needs to be in favor of bringing it. but I don't know.
The only problem you run into is a sunshine question of, are you voting in advance of a meeting? So you have to do that all here in the context of the meeting, rather than come in by saying, I've got 3 other people who will support me in this position.
Well, I assume that we will have an equivalent form that has, that it's a motion essentially, that you've got to list the 3 people on there.
And again, as long as we're keeping a record on
Yeah.
that, we have to be careful on sunshine. Because we have to
Absolutely.
make sure that we're doing
Yeah.
everything transparent.
So 4 gets a little sticky.
Yes,
But if it's not 4, it's not as big a deal.
right. And so staying below that number that is not a quorum.
Right.
And again, with the idea that this is not a vote, this is a recommendation about
Yeah.
something we would talk about. I would support conversation on this issue is,
Yeah.
I think, a caveat that needs to be clear.
And I think 3 is important. I guess I think of like, not only do we legislate, but we educate. And so the idea, even if we're not going to support it as a council, or it's going to fail up here, I think the idea that it's presented to the community so they know that we discussed it, that we analyzed it, and it still got shot down. I think it has just as much value as if we actually supported it and it proceeded forward.
See that?
Other comments? Karen and Emerson, neither of you have really had anything to say.
No,
on this one.
I'm fine in that case with the 3. I'm fine with, because it's unsupported. I'm fine with 3.
I think 3 is fine with me. We're still completing the objective that we're at least listening and
Right.
reviewing what they want us to look at.
So one of this things that I think then we have to remember is when the unsupported item goes back to a board or commission, it will then go, if the board or commission wants to send it to us, or if a council member wants to send it to us, then that information will be in our packet through this form, so that people can understand if they're being asked to essentially reconsider such a thing.
Now, and I think one of the things that I get lost in or confused is as the liaison to a board or commission, are we responsible for getting any policy recommendations passed? So for instance, a board or commission that you sit on, you might not like the policy recommendation yourself as an individual council member. So I feel like I wouldn't take any ownership of ensuring that it got passed, either because I don't like the policy, the politics, whatever it is. So, I guess the question is, what role does the liaison have in shepherding it through passage?
So we just adopted in section 4.040 in our boards and commissions, a definition of the role of the liaison, and it includes this sentence. The liaison should not be an advocate for the commission, give direction or influence the decision of the commission. The liaison may assist and provide information as invited by the board and commission members. So I think it's pretty clear, we're not advocating for that particular policy. I think we do have a responsibility as a liaison to be accurate in how we describe the deliberation around that policy, the substance of that policy. But no, I think we've already expressly said, you're not an advocate for it. You are simply a conduit of information back and forth.
Okay, yeah, because 6 was a little unclear as to. Okay.
Well, and just taking the North Elm diet as an example, it's unsupported by staff and say, I personally do not support it. But the board, the commission would like it to be presented to council. Do I have an obligation or a duty to get 2 other votes in order to get it in front of council?
If I may, you would then be an advocate. So I think your task is to communicate it, get it into the process, and then the process does whatever the process is going to do.
All right.
That would be my assessment of it, because otherwise you do step into the role of an advocate.
So fundamentally, then it is up to the leadership of the board and the commission to find the
3.
members that would be.
Right.
Now, I mean, I can remember in golf carts. I remember somebody called me and said, I want to do golf cart legislation. And I said, well, I don't support that, but I pointed them to you because I knew you did at the time.
Yeah.
So I think it's also fair to do that when we
Absolutely.
know that there are people who are supportive.
Can I just ask a clarification? So it's not the role of liaison to be an advocate, but does that prohibit us from being advocates? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
So
a
there's a
fair
difference,
question.
is it?
Where?
It's a,
So if you're an advocate, I'm sorry,
no, go ahead.
if you're an advocate at the committee level itself or the commission level itself, that could be problematic. That's not the purpose. If you're here and you're speaking both in the position of liaison and a position of a council member, you can advocate for anything that you want to advocate for. Otherwise, you'd be neutralizing your vote.
So we could ask for other committee members to sign on, but we just shouldn't push it that hard.
No, if you feel a desire to do it, I think you can do it, because all you're
But you
doing.
shouldn't feel obligated.
You shouldn't feel obligated.
Okay.
That's right. You might have a great deal of belief in whatever it is that's going on, and you may want to advocate for it. You can do that. Again, if you don't, then I think your task is to get it teed up for the process itself, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
I think to me, the distinction is, are you advocating for the commission itself or the policy the commission has put forward? Right? Because it's the policy that council should be really focused on rather than the source of that policy.
That's
Yeah.
a fair
I
distinction.
agree with
Yeah,
that
that's-
distinction.
All right, I think, it looks like we're at 3. I think we have decisions. I think it's almost time for us to be finished. Dr. Peoples, do you have a clear understanding of the board and commission process since you are really at the helm of it?
Clearish. No, I do.
All right, and then we'll make sure that we'll get a summary put together so that everyone knows what's going on.
And then will that summary go straight to the boards and commissions or to us to get to our boards and commissions?
Why don't we do it both ways? I think
Okay.
each of us should schedule some time with our boards and commissions just to walk through it. But certainly sending it directly onto the chairs so they at least have some
Everybody has
time
the
to get used to
information.
it makes sense.
Great.
Is that agreeable to you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
When
all-
will that be ready? Excuse me, just because we do have commission meetings coming up.
So it's essentially ready, and the boards and commissions have already been introduced to the 2 forms. There has been a couple that have used them, so they've already been introduced, but we haven't sent out the flow chart. So
Okay.
we can repackage it and get that out.
And perhaps this doesn't bear saying, but maybe we should. There are certain things that will progress to you no matter what, like the planning commission.
Yes,
So again,
Yeah.
whether you have 2 or 3 or
doesn't matter.
7, doesn't matter. It still comes to you. That's the process.
All right, we have, I believe, we haven't agreed to, we have 2 boards and commission appointments to make. Dana Cooley applied for library board. Would we like to appoint Dana?
Yes.
All right, and then Janie Worthington has reappointment, and I believe you nodded all yes, so we'll make those official in our regular meeting. Why don't we take 5 minutes and then we will get started pretty close to on time.
Right.
Going into 6 and going to share.
We wait.
All right, good evening. Welcome to the, what are we on? June 6th meeting of the Webster Grove City Council, our regular meeting. We welcome you and you're happy to raise questions, ideas, share comments. For those of you who are here, as well as those who are in attendance via Zoom. If you would like to make a public comment, either during our public hearing on the budget or during the time for resident comments, you need to fill out a card like this that's over there by the door. If you are on Zoom, we'll ask you to use the raise your hand function when the time comes. Your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. And then we just want to make sure everyone who wants to comment has time to do so and that we can complete our business within a reasonable time. So we will start this evening with the roll call.
Mayor Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss,
Here.
Councilmember Franklin,
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Alexander,
Here.
Councilmember Richardson. Here. Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Here.
All right, we have two proclamations tonight to celebrate important segments of our community for the month of June here. We're going to start with our proclamation on Juneteenth. And I know we have a few members of Doris Rogers' family with us. So I will come down and read the proclamation if you'd like to join me so I can hand it off to you when we're finished. And I invite council to come on down with me as well, so we can also take a picture or two. And then we'll move to our second proclamation. Yes, it's time. Right here in the middle. I need to speak to you. All right, we have with us here members of Doris Rogers' family, and I'm going to go ahead with this proclamation. Whereas on January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation went into effect, recognizing and securing in law the unalienable right to freedom of every enslaved person behind Confederate lines. And over 2.5 years later, Union Army General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, and read Order Number 3 on June 19th, 1865, informing the enslaved residents of that state of their freedom. And from that day forward, June 19th has been a day of celebration, prayer, and reflection focused on the history, hardships, and achievements of African-American people throughout the United States. And the work of securing liberty and justice for all continues as communities across the nation confront, challenge, and seek to eradicate systemic racism. And whereas Doris A. Rogers was born and raised in North Webster Groves and lived a life devoted to community service, she was instrumental in starting the North Webster Community Improvement Association, a precursor to the North Webster Neighborhood Coalition. She was employed by the city of Webster Groves as a building inspector and consistently worked to obtain equal street maintenance for North Webster residents. She was instrumental in the efforts that prevented eminent domain from converting the northernmost Webster border streets of Allison, Waymire, and North Elm from residential to commercial streets. And whereas when Riverside Park, affectionately known as the Bottoms, was raised and replaced by what is currently the Webster Groves Public Works Department, Doris's engagement helped to secure the development of Ivory Crockett Park. Doris was a member of the League of Women's Voters and an advocate for health insurance for Black public works employees. Doris was an example of the countless individuals who lived a life committed to improving the lives of the community of Webster Groves. And whereas the City Council declared Juneteenth an official city holiday on July 6, 2021, and we honor the life of Doris A. Rogers and will continue to educate current and future generations of the past harms which created a series of circumstances that are both challenges and responsibilities of each generation. Now, therefore, I, Laura Arnold, Mayor of the City of Webster Groves, and the entire City Council pay tribute to Doris A. Rogers and hereby proclaim the 19th day of June, 2023 as Juneteenth in the City of Webster Groves, and invite all to the Juneteenth celebration at Ivory Crockett Park on June 15th at 6:30 p.m. and urge all to take cognizance of this occasion by learning more about its origins, reflecting on how they can promote equity, and honoring the resilience, achievements, and legacy of our African-American community. I just want to say thank you all for being here. As I said, I learned so much just reading the proclamation. And it's a story of a woman I didn't know yet in Webster, so I appreciate that very much. Right. Don't go anywhere. We got another one to do, folks. Well, you all can go. Okay, how about if we start with whoever's accepting or what group of you? I thought I heard 3 of you were accepting this proclamation. Why don't you all come up first and then we'll bring everybody up for the picture. All right, right in the middle. Okay. Let's see if I can do this one, right? Yeah, good one. All right. Whereas the city of Webster Groves values diversity, equity, and inclusion and respects and honors the dignity of every human being. And whereas the contributions of the LGBTQ+ community to the history and success of Webster Groves are immeasurable. And whereas the month of June has been nationally designated as LGBTQ+ Pride Month and has its origins in the Stonewall Inn uprising in New York in June 1969, Christopher Street Liberation Day, and the LGBT Civil Rights Movement. And whereas Pride Month is a call to action for equality, liberty, and justice for all, and has become a celebration of our LGBTQ+ lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community, family, and friends. And whereas the first official Pride Parade Day was in 1970, and for the past 53 years, our country has endeavored to celebrate the courage, dignity, and self-worth of everyone in the LGBTQ+ community through parades and other events. Now, therefore, I, Laura Arnold, Mayor of the City of Webster Groves, and the entire City Council hereby proclaim the month of June as Pride Month and June 28th as Pride Day in the City of Webster Groves, and urge our community to join in this uplifting celebration of diversity and inclusion that is national and global. Before I hand this over, I forgot to say you all are representatives of Webster Groves High School, and would you remind me of the name of your group at the high school? Didn't mean it to be a quiz.
Some people wanted to change to Gay Student Association,
Okay.
which is kind of a humor, but that's not what it originally was. So I
Okay.
think that will cause some discourse.
Okay, there we go. Well, I'm gonna hand this, someone has to put their hands on this. All of you at the same time. Good, all right. So now we'll take another picture. Oh, yeah, everybody, I'm sorry. Right, and as I said, you all are welcome to stay, but we totally understand if you would. You can if you want to. I just want to go on the record. My sister's now asking if she can leave. All right, thank you very much. It is time for us to move on in our agenda. Oh, boy. Thank you all for coming. All right, we are now going to move on to the public hearing about the FY 2024 budget. And I am going to read the title, which is Proposed City Budget for Fiscal Year 2024. Just as a note to council, The place for us to do amendments is later in the agenda, so we'll do the public hearing portion right now. We're not going to worry about amendments quite yet. I believe I have done my best to open the public hearing, and now it's your turn, Eric.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Eric Peterson, Assistant City Manager, Director of Finance and Administration. Prior to the public hearing, we always offer an overview of the budget. I was really hoping all those fun people were here to talk about our city budget and the remarkable success we've made together as a group working on our budget. So I will grab Jenny. I can drive here because I brought my mouse with me, I think, as soon as I find the mouse. Where you at? There, okay. Got it. And so again, for everyone watching at home, WebsterGrovesMo.gov budget/budget has all the information that we're talking about tonight. Again, our proposed budget, the bottom line numbers, so these are numbers before the amendments that you have worked on. The proposed budget for all funds was revenue at about 27.6 million, 26.7 in expenditures, a surplus in all funds proposed of about $1 million. That is not, for all those folks who wonder at home about our operating budget, we've heard about the structural deficit. That is not this number that we're talking about. It's not, this is all funds. What we're talking about in terms of the structural deficit and those issues is in the general fund. Here we do see a deficit in the proposed budget of $397,000. That is a vast improvement again from last year, where we started at about 1.6 million, 1.5 million to have to make up. So again, kudos to everyone involved in the budget process and the entire city team. Briefly, before hearing comments, there are adopted amendments that have been made by the council that affect many different funds. The general fund, you have moved the comprehensive plan development services over to the special initiatives fund, moved ARP funds into the general fund, and have funded the large capital asset replacement fund for the first year for this seeding of that fund. Also, in the special initiatives fund, we adopted many funds last time we met, created that fund to the tune of $950,000, continued the investment in sustainability and business development to 150 collectively. Also reserved funds for the potential for flood buyouts at 500,000 and a continued investment in the city's DEI efforts. And in the capital improvement fund, we did move forward the purchase of replacement police pistols from FY 26 to 24 to the tune of about 25,000. I did want to just talk briefly on the deficit and surplus and what you have done so far. This is the effect of staff amendments, or what you've adopted on the general fund. This is general fund only, which has had very few amendments to date. But we started the budget again with a proposed deficit of $397,000. You have passed one amendment so far of $150,000. And then if you go to the bottom of that list, the ARP revenue loss, that remainder, when we moved 1.404 million from the ARP fund to general fund, we've only moved 1.25 million into the special initiatives fund and the large capital asset fund. So we have 154,000 left in the general fund that shows up as revenue to that fund, one-time revenue for this year only. But then there are three amendments tonight that we are proposing from the staff level. The pension ratio adjustment, we talked about that at our last meeting. We have an interest income re-estimate for you, and the legal service savings for you, savings about $10,000 this coming year. If you adopt them all, the deficit will be brought down to $41,000 in FY 24. That's just the staff amendments related to the general fund. Okay. Go ahead.
Is the column on the right like a running total?
That is correct. That's a running total of that. So that does not include, I'm sorry, let me ask.
No, I was just looking at signs and trying to figure out where it was.
So this is 397. We put back 150,000 into that. So we saved the budget so that it's moved to 247. This saves the budget 36. It goes up to down to 211, the deficit, closer to zero. This is new revenue into the fund, so that decreases the deficit again.
Oh, it's like negative.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and then this is a savings off of the budget. So these are changes to the budget.
Yeah.
As proposed.
And so some are revenue and some are
Exactly.
expense, and that's
Some
why
are
their
rev-
signs look opposite, but they're
Exactly.
actually all moving in the same
Yeah.
direction. Okay, thank you.
This next one is the exact same chart, just showing Councilmember Smith has three amendments he proposed. So we wanted to show you the effect of those amendments, if all adopted, on the deficit. And that would obviously leave a surplus. I want to be very clear, that's a one-year surplus driven by, those changes and such, and then, but it does have a positive effect moving forward into future years. So just to give you a sense, if you adopt them all, when we get to amendments later tonight, we will be able to walk through if you have any questions about effects on funds for all those things. And so just for the public and for you, our remaining budget process tonight, we have our public hearing and any budget amendments you wish. June 20th is adoption of the budget. We can take amendments if we need to that night, if there are any reconciling, but again, that really is our drop dead date per the charter and our need to get the budget adopted. And then on June 28th, approximately, we'll have the budget republished and out, the new book with the adopted version. So Madam Mayor, that is my introduction of the budget for the budget hearing, and I will turn it over to you for any speakers on the budget.
Do
or
we,
questions.
yeah, do we have any questions from council at this point? Again, we'll come back to the amendments shortly. All right, then we will go to our public comments, and Mr. Dave Buck is for the public hearing.
Hello, council. First of all, I wish, my first comment, I wish more residents would have attended and observed your budgeting process, as I said in an earlier email. I think they would have gained a much better understanding and appreciation for how our city works, how it operates, and how you think and how you ask questions and how you work together as a team. So maybe next year, I have three quick things. First, each department budget showed how it was aligned with your new strategic plan. But right now it's a draft and it says preliminary adopted on February 7th, which is 4 months ago. And so I'm just curious, after 4 months, will you be relooking the strategic plan to update it or just accept it as is and then officially publish it? Because it's not on the website now. The Missouri Constitution requires that a state pass a balanced budget every year. I believe that the Charter Review Advisory Board should recommend the same requirement for Webster Groves, specifically for the general fund, which is by far, as you know, your biggest budget at 70% of all funds and is uniquely the city's annual operating budget. But with the discipline of no longer touching the general fund reserve balance currently at $10,148,000, down from $12 million in 2019. As Bud Belamo famously and continuously has analyzed and pointed out, the city has a very poor historic track record and habit of dipping into and decreasing this rainy day emergency fund over the years to balance, quote, balance the general fund budget. And that has to stop, in my opinion, because actually, as Emerson has taught me and enlightened me, that's not really bad balancing the budget, is it, Emerson? 3, finally, your proposed fiscal year 24 general fund budget now shows a loss of whether it's 398,000 or 41,725, but it's a loss. After 40-year career, my 40-year career of managing P&Ls, I believe there is a financial side to budgeting and a psychological side to budgeting. I am of the very strong opinion that council and our city will be much better off biting the bullet and taking your lumps now by getting to a fiscal year 24 balanced budget on paper without kicking the proverbial can down the road and hoping, worrying, and waiting for Eric's trend lines to get better. Getting to a balanced budget can both be a financial and psychological win-win for city council, the staff, and the community. Yes, cutting expenses is hard and painful, but it can also be fun.
Right.
And I'm going to keep going, so get over it now. The community will adapt. Not that all have to be permanent cuts, but rather delays until a later time when you can afford it.
Thank you, Dave.
The biggest win-win is that maybe finally people in this community will get off the backs of Marie and Eric because they're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Do we have any public comments on Zoom? You need to raise your hand if so.
No.
All right, I don't see anything. Now I'm going to then ask the city attorney if there is anything to be entered into the record for us.
Move for the entry into the record of the PowerPoint provision that was done this evening by Eric Peterson and the ordinances and the charter of the city of Webster.
And proposed budget for 2024.
Yes.
And the budget too. Okay. All right, then I will close this public hearing and ask for a motion to have a first and second reading, please.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to ask for the first and second reading of the proposed city budget. Is that what I'm saying?
Oh.
Wait,
There's no
There's no-
first and second reading in this.
There isn't. See, I was getting so good at this and then I got bad at it
I
again.
will ask for whatever.
Next
you want
meeting,
me
we
to
have
do.
a resolution.
So
All right.
Moving for the adoption of proposed budget.
But we're going to do that later because haven't finished.
Right.
Okay.
20th. Well,
Yeah, so I'll be back,
Yeah.
I'll be back in
Sure.
2 weeks,
Sure.
Emily, and you and I can do
Okay.
this all over again. Okay, we have come to our point in time in our meeting for the remarks from the community and visitors. And I have one card here from Clark Hoteling.
I wasn't planning on saying anything tonight, but Sarah and Laura's kind comments about our event on Sunday got me to get up here and to say that an event like that, where 300 community members came out to support gun violence awareness, could not happen without what you guys did to help us. And I just really wanted to thank the city for publicizing and for the police to get us safely across Elm Street, Elm Avenue, and also for the attendance in the march and then the proclamation. Those were very much appreciated by us. And one final note, my wife said it was a perfect Midwestern town event when the city council had to leave the rally to go serve beer at the art fair across the street. So thank you for multitasking that day. It was a one-day event, but it's a 365-day job for our organization. So thank you very much for your support.
Thank you, Clark. Next, we have Joan McGibney.
Good evening. Thank
Hello.
you all for being here this evening, serving us here. I've got a couple of questions. First of all, I'm really impressed. I spent the afternoon looking over the budget, but it's still very, it's a lot different than it was 20 plus years ago. And I think I have a lot of respect for all the work that's been done on it and all that you're redoing. A couple comments. One of in the introduction, you want to look for pedestrian safety, traffic calming, and stormwater concerns. And it's going to be very interesting to see how you're going to do the traffic calming and pedestrian safety on Elm. I really think that's great what you're going to do between Glendale and Watson. That, you know, they're going to redo that, but I'm sure the traffic situation is going to be kind of frustrating, but that'll be good to see. Then I was interesting to see that since I was chairman of the sales tax campaign years ago, the pool versus the point of sale, I was really interesting to see that a lot of our revenue is from sales tax. So I think that's great. That's wonderful that our citizens are supporting us that way. Then on public safety, that was really interesting to see all the different things we're going to be doing, new technology and new instruments that our police and fire are going to be using. And it's a shame this time of age we have to do that, but with the crime situation, it's important, the public, that we have a safe community. But I do want to say a good thing about, I'm not going to go into details, but I did see where our police officers use restraint and compassion into dealing with some of our citizens, which I think is a good step in the right direction. Finally, my last comment is on the aquatic center. I'm so happy that you're going to go with the bigger plan, the larger plan. I saw you did that, prove that last time. I do still have some concerns with doing the making it sliding thing. I'm concerned about keeping able to get lifeguards and being able to do maintenance and all that good stuff. But I do hope you I couldn't find all that in the budget on the aquatic thing, but it was so extensive, but that's all my comments. And thank you again for all your service.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Do we have any comments on Zoom? Public comments? I do not see any hands raised, so that will be the end of our remarks from community and visitors. And we will move on to any new business that anyone in the council or city manager, city attorney, city clerk would like to raise. No one's jumping on it, so we're going to move on to our unfinished business. Councilmember Alexander, could you call for the third reading of bill number 9226, please?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to call for the third and final reading of bill number 9226 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9226, third and final reading. An ordinance of the city of Webster Groves authorizing the city manager to execute a contract for refuse, recycling, and yard waste collection services with Waste Management of Missouri, Inc.
Do we have any discussion? I'm just going to make one comment. I know we're renewing with Waste Management, and I know that was the best option available to us. I just want to note for the record that we still get regular complaints about Waste Management and their service. And I would encourage residents to continue to let us know, because we're going to have to at some point reevaluate this contract as well. And it's good for us to understand the track record of the company involved.
I mean, I'd like to make one statement also to the seniors. They're eligible for a discount at Waste Management. All you do is file the appropriate forms, the ladies downstairs, and they'll take care of it.
What, I do have a question. What is our policy with them when people have, I thought that you called them if you have large items that you want them to pick up, which are different than just.
Use your microphone.
If you have large items that you want them to pick up, which is different than what, is just put in the trash cans. Because I know I'm just noticing stuff that's in a particular property, and it's been sitting out there for almost 2 weeks now. And it's furniture that's been put out there to be picked up. I mean, what is that policy or because it's not real clear when you look at the like the refrigerator magnet thing that you go up and they say, call if it's something that's too large for 2 people to pick up, you need to call.
Dr. Peoples.
Thank you. So Director Ray is on the meeting, so I'm going to ask him to respond. And while he's getting his camera on to respond, some of the complaints that we've had, individuals may not actually have trash service. So that is a whole different discussion. I'm not saying that that's the situation that you're speaking of, but typically residents do need to make arrangements with Waste Management, which should be an easy process. However, we do understand that it's not always the big process. Todd,
Yes, I'm here.
did you hear the full question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so residents are supposed to call Waste Management to schedule the large item pickups. So the ones that Council Member Alexander is talking about, they probably have not called, and it's probably somebody cleaning out a house. They're moving out or something. So we probably need to get code enforcement involved with that.
Okay, but so they're not moving. They're still there. And I think another question that I would have that I would just like to bring up is I know that I had several people mention to me, and I even experienced it myself, where there was a period for, during the last 6 months where I didn't get a bill. But I did get a call saying that they're going to disconnect my service. And so again, I just want to share that because that's not just something that occurred with me. I had several neighbors communicating the same issue themselves.
I'm looking real quickly at the contract. It has a provision on page 7 called bulky waste. And it says the company will provide scheduled bulky waste pickup, which would be these large pickup items that you just described, to all cart service recipients, that would be a resident here, up to 1 time each week and up to 1 item per collection at no additional charge. Cart service recipients will provide company with at least 5 business days advance notice, and bulky waste will be collected on the scheduled date. Additional pickups or additional items are subject to additional fee as set forth in Exhibit A. And then there's an attached exhibit that describes that. But all of that would be something that would be available if you called to schedule it, told them what it was. They theoretically should be telling you how it gets covered under, whether it's the one item or if there's more, if there was an additional charge, what that would mean.
So might I suggest that either Director Ray or Dr. Peoples, that when we notify Waste Management that we want to sign these contracts, that we just at least update them on this conversation so that they do understand that we still have some service challenges, shall we say, with
Thank you,
them.
Madam Mayor. And I do know the Public Works folks have weekly, if not
Yes.
several times a week, conversations with Waste Management because we do get several complaints regarding missed pickup or arranging bulk services. Councilwoman Alexander, I don't have details, but I do know a few months ago there were some billing issues and hopefully they've all been resolved. On the other hand, Waste Management has improved, I believe, in terms of some of their receptiveness to picking things up. And, you know, and receptive isn't even the right word. It was a staffing issue for most of the conversations we've had. So Director Ray, I don't know if there's anything you want to add there as we move along.
No, yeah, it was staffing issues and they seem to have gotten that corrected.
All right, thank you. Is there further discussion? All right, let's have the vote then, please.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. All right, we will move on to new business. Councilmember Franklin, could you call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9227, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9227.
Second.
Bill 9227, first reading. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit to WG Restaurant Investors LLC to allow a restaurant, no drive-through use, on an approximately 0.42 acre tract of land in an existing structure at 101 West Lockwood Avenue in the D Commercial District and matters related thereto, and repealing ordinance 9206.
Do we have a presentation? No. Do we have any questions or concerns for Mara at this point?
Is it just a change in ownership?
I feel like we just did this.
We did just do this. So the ownership is changing again for the location that is known as CJ Muggs. And this is the one that can be administratively approved. So staff approves it. We just needed an official ordinance from you.
And could it be that the new owners are sitting in this room right now?
That would be correct.
All right. Any other questions? All right, then I think we're good. And so we will do our third reading and vote at our next meeting.
But first, we should do the second meeting.
Oh, yeah,
tonight.
sorry. Just moving right along here.
Bill 9227, second reading. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit to WG Restaurant Investors LLC to allow a restaurant, no drive-through use, on an approximately 0.42 acre tract of land in an existing structure at 101 West Lockwood Avenue in the D Commercial District and matters related thereto, and repealing ordinance 9206.
So I'm sorry, so this one is different than the one that we did before for the same
Yes, ma'am.
location. So it was going from CJ Muggs to something different, and now it's going from that to something different.
Yes, ma'am.
What's the new one that we're going to?
Do those of you who are participating in the purchase of this want to make any comment about what plans are?
Well, let Mara do it. But you don't have to.
We're just excited.
So I'm Laura Burns here on behalf of WG Restaurant Investors LLC. It came to our attention that the current owner who just recently purchased the assets of that location would like to sell them. So we have an asset purchase agreement with that current owner. We've spoken to the landlord of the property and are moving forward with purchasing those assets, obtaining the lease reassignment. And then our plans would be to close the restaurant for a brief time while we do some cosmetic renovations. If you've been in there, you know, it's been the same for a really long time. So a little paint and spit and polish, and then be open hopefully this fall with a new restaurant that should fit really well into the community.
Thank you very
You're welcome.
much.
Thank you.
Exciting. Thank you.
Okay, I know now the third reading comes in 2 weeks.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for keeping us on the straight and narrow, and thank you to you all. All right, so Councilmember Bliss, could you call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9228, please?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9228.
Second.
Bill 9228, first reading. An ordinance defining the pay grades of the classified and unclassified service of the city of Webster Groves, fixing the compensation for employees in said classifications and repealing ordinance 9220.
All right, are there any questions or discussion? We'll have the second reading then.
Bill 9228, second reading. An ordinance defining the pay grades of the classified and unclassified service of the city of Webster Groves, fixing the compensation for employees in said classifications and repealing ordinance 9220.
Councilmember Smith, could you call for the reading of resolution number 2023-20?
Yes, Mayor, I call for the reading of resolution 2023-0 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Resolution 2023-20, authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for professional services for the Stormwater Master Plan update and amending the budget for fiscal year 2023.
Is there any discussion on the resolution? All right, I believe this one we vote on.
Yes. Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
All right, we have now worked our way back to the budget amendments for fiscal year 2024 and our proposed budget. There is not an additional presentation, but we do have a set of amendments that come from staff based on our discussions at our last meeting. And I believe Councilmember Smith has some amendments that he is considering offering. And I'm going to suggest that we go ahead and go through the staff amendments since those have been previously discussed and I think fundamentally agreed to. So I'll let you go in whatever order you think makes most sense.
Is if you haven't moved your piles on your desk, the order I put them there, but I'll call them out as we go, Madam Mayor. So we'll start with the amendment number. It says all-1, affects all funds. And this is the estimated interest income re-estimates. So we have taken a look at our investments and also the yield potential over the coming year. And then added revenue re-estimates in there in the general fund. And then also the other funds did not have any of those revenues added. So that is, when you look down, everything below 01, the other funds listed there, that is new revenue added to each of those funds on that page. So just briefly, I'm going to tell you what funds they are because you all don't talk in the budget numbers like I do. So I'll go down the order. That is the general fund, the street fund, the pension fund, Old Webster, Old Orchard, the capital fund, sewer lateral, stormwater fund, and the park improvement fund. And so, Madam Mayor, the staff bring this to you. It would need a motion in a second.
Yes. Do we have a motion to adopt this amendment to the budget?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to move to adopt amendment ALL-1 to the budget.
Second.
Is there discussion?
So just to clarify, this is new revenue that wasn't in the budget and we're adding it to the budget.
It
We're
is new
not
revenue, except
moving
for
it.
the first line
Okay,
is only about 5,000 in new extra revenue.
okay.
That the general fund had estimated about 479,000. So our revenue just ticked up a little bit in the general fund.
I see.
So
Do you, I'm not asking you to add this up, but do you know roughly like what the net is that we're increasing here?
I do not off the top of
That's
my head.
okay.
I didn't add it up. I'm sorry.
It's adding, so that's good.
Yes, it's all adding.
All right, any further discussion? Let's have the vote, please.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes, amendment ALL-1 is adopted.
Next would be OW-1. This is a request from the Old Webster Business District Advisory Commission. This is a net neutral budget amendment. They just simply move 2,500 from one account to a different account within their budget to account they want to fund the holiday open house that is put on by the trade association.
Any discussion?
Need a motion in a second.
Oh, that's right. Is there a motion to adopt amendment OW-1?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the amendment number OW-1.
Second,
Now, do we have any discussion? Let's have the vote, please.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Mayor Arnold.
Yes. Amendment OW-1 is adopted.
Next item is amendment grant -1. This is in the grant fund. When we originally proposed the budget, we put in what we call a plug number for the grant for the EV charging stations of 265,000. As we've developed that grant, the grant budget that we intend to submit to the federal government for the EV charging stations is 2.5 million. So this is an increase in the grant fund, both in revenue and expenditures of 2.235 million to be a total of 2.5 in the grant fund for that grant. So again, this, if we receive that grant, it will still require your approval to accept the grant and take in the funds, but this is the part in the budget that's handled then.
All right, do we have a motion for the amendment grant -1?
That's Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve amendment number grant-1.
Second.
Is there discussion?
So this isn't funds that we have yet, but we're labeling where we want it to go if we get it.
That is correct. The grant fund exists to receive grant dollars. There are some that we always know the police grants are a very steady line. We know we're applying for this grant, so we're putting it in the budget to have that expenditure and revenue authority. It still will require under the federal regulations you to approve the acceptance of the grant should we be awarded the grant. And then also we will have to determine the match for the grant at the time we accept it and where that may come from.
Do we know what the match percentage is?
The match is 20%.
20%.
Some of that can be in kind. So we have not yet submitted the grant. It's due next week. So we're still working out the exact match.
Understand that. And this is all for EV chargers?
All EV charging. Yep.
Is this in addition to the one, I'm assuming this is in addition to the ones that we'd already kind of talked about, or is this to cover the ones that we've talked about?
It's mostly to cover the ones we've talked about, those that you don't see currently installed. So this is the old Webster parking garage, the Alma lot at the rec center at Public Works up in Dutton, which is right by Maypop off of Marshall and Summit.
There's
Those
some
types of
other new exciting locations along with some solar charging units. So we're excited.
Solar charging EV units?
Uh-huh.
That's exciting. Cool.
All right, additional discussion? Let's have the vote, please.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. Amendment grant -1 is adopted.
Next would be pension -1. This amendment reflects our conversation about changing the pension versus general fund ratio for the general government employees. So that the pension fund would pay 5% of the 8.3% of salary that we are required to contribute. The general fund would pay 3.3 and also renames the police and fire pension fund to the pension fund to reflect that the use is broader than just those two services.
Do I have a motion for the adoption of pension -1?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move for the adoption of pension -1 amendment.
Second.
Is there discussion? Can we just emphasize one more time that this is not going to change the value of any individual employee's pension in any way whatsoever?
It does not do any of that. It does not change a pension, doesn't change the calculations, doesn't cost the city any more money. And again, you have already in fact taken action to pay down some of the pensions ahead to reduce that cost in the pension fund. All this does is change where in our budget, what we're required to contribute comes from. Just changes that ratio
And the name.
and the name. of the
Yeah,
fund,
yeah. All right, any additional discussion? Let's have the vote, please.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. Amendment pension -1 is adopted.
Moving on, this is SIF 8 Special Initiatives Fund -8. This amendment is Parks and Rec Department is writing a grant under the EPA 319 Clean Water Act. This would provide $5,000 out of the $100,000 fund balance in that fund for grant writer services. So one-time grant writer services to write that grant. Request of the
Need to use the word riparian though.
Do you want me to use riparian more
I
often?
love that word.
Yes.
Would you like to offer an amendment that includes that word?
I'll put some riprap around your riparian zone, so.
Can I have a motion, or would someone like to make a motion for amendment SIF -8?
Oh, go ahead. Oh, I'll make a motion to approve amendment SIF -8.
Second.
Is there discussion? All right, let's have the vote, please.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. Amendment SIF -8 is adopted.
You look to amendment GF number 5 next. This is our a change to the legal services budget, would reduce funding by $10,200. The prosecuting attorneys have left the city service effective Wednesday, tomorrow after the last court meeting. Later tonight in the consent agenda, you will have a contract to approve with Brunt Trager and Billings PC to provide the prosecuting attorney services. The current monthly retainer is $3,350 for the current attorney. That firm has offered us the same services at $2,500 a month for the prosecuting attorney services. So just a little over $10,000 a year savings in the legal services budget. This improves the general fund deficit by $10,200.
Is this a, oh, I should wait till after.
Yes, may I have a motion for amendment GF -5?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to move to adopt amendment GF5.
Second.
Yes. Go ahead, Emily.
I was just, is this a long-term, like, this isn't a stopgap, this is our plan going forward?
Yes, it is.
Further discussion? All right, let's have the vote, please.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes, amendment GF -5 is adopted. And for those of you counting at home, we have reached the final of the
This is the
staff
last of the staff
amendments.
yes. So Madam Mayor, this is amendment GF -3. This amendment is a net neutral amendment in the general fund of $107,275. There are several areas of refunds that we provide from the city that are not intended. So I want to be very clear. We have some very specific things that are escrow. We know we're going to pay that money back. We hold them in what's called liability accounts. They're off budget. Trees are a great example. So there's a 2-year tree escrow. You put money in, 2 years later, you get that money back. These are unintended refunds, things that we're not intending to give money back on all the time. And so as we have talked through the ways of accounting that, there are many different ways, but it's right now, how we currently do it is in the revenue line, we simply deduct that expense back out of the revenue line, which doesn't show you then where that expense is in the budget, right? So you're getting the net same number, but you're just not seeing that expense. There are 2 areas of concern that I've been concerned about where we have expenses, legitimate expenses coming out as negative revenues. The first being an ambulance billing. So quite simply, our check for what has been billed is reduced by the amount that the company who does our billing gets to take. But that is being deducted out of the revenue and is sort of buried in the revenue line, not shown as an expense in our budget. And then also our bank charges. Our interest income over the years has simply been reduced to account for what the bank charges are that the bank charges us for. Now, not all of our bank charges are related to interest income, but that's where it's been involved. So what this amendment does is create expense lines to show those refund expenses that we estimate for the bank charges, and the ambulance billing creates those expense lines in the appropriate departments and then increases the revenue by the same amount. So it's a net neutral to the budget, but it shows you clearly where the expenses are.
Thank you. Do I have a motion for amendment GF -3?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve amendment number GF -3.
Second.
Madam Mayor, if I just real quick before I forgot to mention, so Parks and Rec is not included in this, and there's some accounting we need to look at with Parks and Rec. So we didn't include them if you look at the list of attachments. So that's the one department not included. We'll work on that and probably bring amendment mid-year back to you all.
Okay, thank you. Is there discussion? All right, let's have the vote, please.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes, amendment GF -3 has been adopted. We will move now to any amendments that members of the council would like to propose.
I have 3 filed from Mr. Smith, Madam Mayor, so.
So, Mr. Smith, it's
Yes.
your point, whatever order you want, whatever, however you'd like to proceed with
Well,
these.
first I'd like to look at amendment number GF-4. In conversation last meeting, we were talking about stipends and increases for our staff. I'm recommending that we maintain the 4% that was already built into the budget, but add a $1,500 stipend for each of the full-time and benefited part-time general employees. That does not include any collective bargaining agreement or compensation employee.
All right, would you formally make a motion then for the adoption of amendment GF-4?
Mayor, I'd like to make a approve amendment number GF-4.
Second.
All right, is there discussion?
I was just gonna ask, how does this stipend amount compare, Dr. Peoples, when you kind of polled council with where people fell out? Is 1,500 kind of what the consensus was?
It was the consensus. There was, sorry, thinking back, one for 500, and the remainder fell in between 1,000 and 1,500.
Okay. And I know, I think in that same consensus, there was talk about maybe doing higher than the 4%, but I know we don't have an amendment for that now. So that
One of the things that we,
possibly
at
be a
least I
second
looked
one.
at, the 5% will be forever.
Mhm.
This is a one-time hit to the budget and we're done.
But this doesn't, like, this amendment doesn't rule that out as a change. Is that correct?
I mean, 4%?
Right.
No.
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 4% is, the budget currently states that 4% is what is going to
So there would need to be an
happen.
amendment to make 5.
Correct.
So would part-time employees receive the same amount as full-time employees?
The way the amendment is written, Councilman Franklin, yes, but the amendment could be amended.
I'm going to move that, I'm okay with the $1,500 for the full-time, that we decrease the stipend for part-time employees to $750. For any part-time employees that are non-unionized.
Do we have a second for that amendment, to the amendment?
Can I offer just a quick bit of education?
Yeah.
Just on that
Please.
real quick. So we have benefited 0.5 part-timers, which there are 2 of in this chart, and then there is 1.7. So in the past, historically, we've taken their numbers and made them a ratio of those hours that they work. So, if you look at the one in 01/01/05, that's a 0.7. So if you wanted, we could do it that way. So I just wanted to give you that information.
So yeah, I'm gonna withdraw my first amendment and submit a new amendment, which the stipend for part-time employees would be based off of their FTE. Correct.
All right, is there a second for this amendment to the amendment?
I'll second that.
Discussion then.
What would the savings be if we did this? I mean,
Well, in general, you're going to see 1,500, you're going to have about in straight stipend cost, about 1,800, 1,900 in straight stipend, and probably add on some ERE, about 2,500 total.
And I assume
It's
that
3 people that are affected by
the
this.
motivation here is, fairness, okay. Sorry. please
how
go
is
ahead.
that fair? Are you saying it's fair or unfair?
I think it's currently, I believe that it would be unfair to give a part-time worker the same amount as a full-time worker. I think it treats them, it treats them as equals when they aren't.
I guess when I think of a benefited part-time worker, that's someone who works 30 hours a week.
So we have some that work 20 hours a week and some that work 28. So we have 0.5 and 0.7, just to make sure we're not drawing into the pension world. So
And all full-time work a minimum of 40.
they work, yes, 40 hours, yes. So
I guess, taking it from the converse, I guess, is I think that the perception for the full-time employees receiving the exact same as a part-time employee, I think would have negative consequences. In other words, I think that what it would demonstrate to our full-time employees is they're not valued as much as, or they're valued just as much as our part-time employees from a cost perspective. And obviously, I think that they should be differentiated just based off of the hours.
To me, it's so minimal that,
Well, I agree with you.
that, you know, would you want to be the 3 part-time people that just didn't get it? Didn't get as much.
I mean, if they were
That's-
getting an
that's-
increase that was a percentage, they wouldn't be getting as much either because they work fewer hours.
Yeah.
But it's pretty minimal.
To me, it's not about the cost, it's about the perception to our full-time
Yeah.
employees.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of it as more of a hit to the part-time.
Yeah, that's fair.
Rather than,
That's absolutely fair.
Emerson, I had a question on not the amendment to the amendment, but
Let's
we gotta
dispose
vote on-
with the amendment to the
Oh,
amendment
okay.
first, and then we'll discuss the amendment.
And this stipend is paid in 2024, and this is a
So-
one-time.
Yeah, we're focusing first on David's amendment to the amendment,
Oh.
which is the idea of changing the amount for those who are part-time versus full-time. We've had our discussion. Are we ready to vote on the amendment to the amendment? Is everyone clear what we are voting on? I would,
We're voting to change the part-time to 750.
No.
No,
Percentage.
so it's a ratio based on their FTE equivalent status. So we have some that are 0.5. So
Uh-huh.
2 would be getting 750, 1 would be 0.7, which I can't do the math off the top of my head, but would be 0.7 of 1,500.
Okay, so it's comparison to
Yeah.
full-time.
I
Okay.
just think it's cleaner, but.
all right, so let's have the vote on that amendment, and then we'll talk about the underlying amendment.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes,
Councilmember Bliss,
no,
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
6-1.
All right, so the amendment carries. So what we now will discuss is Councilmember Smith's amendment with the change that the ratio will go for part-time employees rather than the full $1,500 stipend. So now please go ahead. I know you all had some questions for Emerson.
oh, my question was, do you have a suggestion of what to offset it? What to use to offset it?
To offset that cost?
Mhm.
Yes, I guess my
Your
next two
other
amendments
amendments
will
are meant to. offset.
demonstrate that.
Okay.
Is there other discussion? Am I correct that the contracts with the firefighters and the police department, it was a $1,000 bonus that each of them received?
They each received $1,000 stipend.
Okay, all right, and I will just say, as I think about whether I want to offer an amendment to the amendment, that my preference would be to be consistent across our workforce in terms of the amount of this particular stipend, and that would be the $1,000 level rather than the $1,500 level.
I think that's a fair point, Madam Mayor. I was just asking, have the firefighters or police received stipends in years past? Or is this the first year that we did it?
To my knowledge, this is the first time a stipend has ever been offered.
And if we're going to be consistent with the stipend, do we also need to be consistent with the percent increase? Are we? debating those?
I think that's harder because the STEP program is involved. Their increase is not calculated in the same way in terms of a COLA because the STEP program is there. Now, I take your point that that means there are some built-in advantages to their increases compared to other kinds of employees, though.
Police and fire average with their step about 5.5% to 6% each step each year. So
And we must be careful, because that's a collective bargaining unit. If we start trying to match what they agree upon with the regular city employees, I don't think we'll be able to do that.
No, I mean, my point is, I don't think that 1,500 for regular employees is really that much of a mismatch because they're getting less in other areas.
COLA.
There's also the uniform allowances that the other public safety receives.
holiday pay. So there's a variety of factors that are different in the compensation packages.
Well, I think just so we can put it on the record and get the votes done. I am going to make a motion to reduce the amount in GF-4 from $1,500 to $1,000 stipend.
I'll second that.
And in doing so, you wanted to make it the same across the board?
That's my rationale for doing it that way. Yes. Plus, I want to, this is a one-time cost and I very much appreciate, Emerson, you thinking about a one-time cost rather than a percentage increase that we would carry from year to year, but we're not out of the budget woods yet. I do think we need to do something because we do need to be able to hire and retain people, but I also want to be careful that we're not, going to make our budget problem harder because this isn't a precedent. We know it's not a precedent. That doesn't mean people won't believe it's a precedent.
And this was a one-time stipend for this year. And this was considering if we were looking at that COLA at the 4% level.
Yes.
Is anybody planning to submit an amendment to change that COLA level?
Being from the 4%.
It doesn't look like it, but that's a piece of information.
That piece of
is
information is
helpful.
what I need
Yeah.
on how I vote for the second amendment to the amendment.
All right, why don't we go ahead and vote on my amendment to the amendment? We're getting so good at this.
Oh, yeah, David.
David did second it.
So this amendment would reduce the stipend to $1,000 ratio proportionally for part-time. Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
No.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
No.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
No.
Councilmember Bliss,
No.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes, and the amendment fails. So now we are back to the Councilmember Smith's $1,500 stipend with the prorated part-time workers. I think we're probably at a point where we can just straight out vote on that one now. All right, let's do that.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. Amendment GF-4 is agreed to. There's my agreed to pile over here.
Councilmember Smith, you have streets and park.
Yes, before I get started, I just want to read a statement here. The city council members have the important responsibility of managing the city's funds. With that responsibility comes the difficult decisions on how to best use the city's revenues and how to fund community service and capital projects. So the city council is responsible for establishing and maintaining fund balances. So the purpose of this next amendment, Street 1, is to use the existing funds in street improvement to pay some of the public works staff for the next couple of years. I think the time is not there. But Eric, we kind of explained how that fund is going to be used for the next 2 or 3 years.
Well,
Absolutely.
can we have the motion for the amendment first and then we'll get our full-on discussion of it.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion for the approval amendment number Street-1.
Second.
Mayor Arnold and members, this amendment would transfer funding for 50% of the cost of 5 public works staff to the Street Improvement Fund. Street Improvement Fund is one of our least stressed funds. These folks do work that is eligible under the authorizing revenue line for the Street Improvement Fund. Jenny's pulling up a variety of files. Jenny, if you can you pull up the Excel file on other funds? We'll have the street fund balance in there. Just want to be clear with you all that the street fund balance 5-year other proposed, so.
It's called what?
The left one, sorry. The
I
left-
hear this.
The left one, there you go. So you pull that up on the screen for me. The street fund is again, very, very well, make it the other one. Here, let me grab it here. Why don't you grab the other one? The other Excel file that looks like that. Right there. You go. That one. Too many Excel files that look the same. But the street fund essentially is open and available for you all. to really, to use, I'm gonna grab this here. Jen, where's my mouse at? Can I find it? There we go. Sorry, folks. Street Improvement Fund. Your fund balance here, as you can see, is going to be $1 million at the end of this year. You also have the mill and overlay and chip seal program coming to an end in a couple of years, not coming to an end, taking their natural pause. There's not an every year use of that fund. And so in a couple of years, we'll have a couple of years off. Just want to draw out, by 29, you'll have about $4.4 million in that fund. So the fund is a wealthy fund. It's not stressed. Now, that's not saying there are other things that fund couldn't be used for. But in terms of ability to move for a few years, staff, if you want to create general fund capacity, this is an option that can be done. So essentially what this motion that Councilmember Smith has here, and I've already added it in, is if you add this 193 into the personnel, you can see, annually, these are your reoccurring costs, about $500,000. Your revenue that's coming into this is just about $1 million. And so again, a very rich property tax-based fund for streets that has a few years. And so Councilmember Smith is proposing to use for a few years personnel services in this fund that can be changed at any point and move those staff back to the general fund as needed. But again, using, much like we do with the park fund and other funds, that there are already people from Public Works Administration paid by the Street Improvement Fund, moving some general labor into that fund as well.
What is this fund generally used for?
Again, this fund, other than a few, the staff for engineering on some street projects, is all chip seal and mill and overlay. Our concrete streets have been generally funded by the road bonds that we've issued in the past, like the 2011 bonds. So this is a well-to-do fund. And actually, as we look at Hancock, at some point, we may need to look at the value of that debt reserve, that we're holding in that fund if it gets that big with the property tax levy in the future.
Could we use this fund for initiatives such as complete streets or bike lanes?
Absolutely. Yes. So, but none of those are yet programmed. So, but yes.
Are they fully staffed? Street maintenance crew?
I believe all the maintenance crews are filled. Yes. So.
I'm also wondering, so to me, generally, I like this idea and I do agree with the long-term fiscal responsibility. The one thing that's come up a couple of times in discussing this is we can move them back. Let's be realistic. Once they're there, we're not going to move them back unless we have some new general fund, large pot of revenue. And so to me, the question becomes, what are we not going to be able to do by moving this over? And that's the part we haven't had a chance to think through. And one of the things that comes to mind is, when we get the stormwater improvement plan back, I have a feeling a lot of this is going to be related to working with our streets and sewers and things around our streets. And are we going to want to use some of that money there as well? So I guess my hesitation is not knowing the other side, right? If we only focus on chip seal and mill and overlay, it makes a lot of sense to me. We've got some unknowns that make me just a little hesitant to pull the trigger this year instead of waiting until next year when we have a little bit more information about how much of this.
I guess my question what little bit more information would we need to make that decision?
For one thing, we'll have the stormwater study back.
And the good thing is that these funds can always be moved back.
The employees could always be moved back.
No, not the employee. I mean, the funds.
The funding for the employees,
funds.
yeah.
Move back to the general fund. My thing is use the
There's
funds that we have, access to. And then we give relief to the general fund and actually decrease our deficit. Not saying that this is going to be a solution for decreasing our deficit. We just need to continue to work on finding cost-saving methods and revenue generating. But at least this way, we are not working in a deficit situation.
So in 2 years, we would be not doing any chip sealing and be saving.
That's correct. So right now in FY 27, FY 27, you have no capital
Right.
expenditures added, so
Mhm.
you're right there about 660,000 in expenses.
We just
Yeah,
have,
I really like the ingenuity of this. Emerson, I really do, but my concern is always, I hesitate to say we're gonna have a special tax and we're gonna pay for employees' salaries. I think we get a little bit dicey once we start doing that. And we're doing it in Parks and Rec. I appreciate that.
and we're doing it in,
This already.
this already. There
Yeah,
are some employees being paid out of this fund already. So for what reason they did it, but I'm just saying, continue that process since those funds are gonna be available. And it's just resources that we have. Just use them.
I don't think it's a bad idea. I understand your mindset and I understand where you're coming from. I just think it's a slippery slope.
I think number one, I feel more comfortable with it seeing these numbers and seeing how healthy that fund is and that it is going to grow each year and that we are going to have a lull in the known expenses. We don't know the unknown. I think my concern coming into this was if we do this, are we kind of hiding annual expenses that could end up biting us or a future council when we do need the street funds and we want to move people back and now we're overextended?
Like I mentioned earlier from our statement, that, we as the council, we're not done yet, trying to create or trying to get rid of our deficit. We still need to find cost savings and revenue to enhance the general fund. And if we get to the point where we can't find anything, then we make adjustments back. But it's our job. We need to still do that revenue searching and cost savings.
Yeah, I guess my thinking on this, and I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but my thinking is it doesn't really feel like it's either. It feels a little bit more like a shell game and that we might, I don't know,
Mayor Arnold.
hide
Yeah.
expenses a little bit. Not hide, that's not the right word, but do you know what I mean? Like lose sight of what the true cost is of a division.
So
Dr.
thank you.
Peoples.
And to that point, and I appreciate the discussion. As part of our budget reporting, knowing where staff are paid is something that council will continue to see. So I certainly appreciate your point in that, but you all will always know the funds that staff are attributed to, what our insurance costs are, because it is important. And honestly, I don't know that there's a right or wrong decision in this. Councilman Smith is correct in that it does help preserve the general fund at a time where we're trying to close the deficit. It's also correct that at some point in time, we may need the street funds. And so employees may have to be moved back into the future. It really gets to what is the priority at this point in time? And I'm certainly not posing that as a question, but for me, what is the priority? Is the priority closing the general fund right now? Is it building all of the funds steadily as we move forward? So it certainly is an option for council to consider, but I certainly want council to know, as well as people listening, that our budgets will always be transparent and you can see where people are paid from. Both proposals, and I know we're only at one, have been shared with the department directors as well. I did not receive feedback. That does not mean they don't have feedback. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well, that this has not necessarily been done in a vacuum.
Eric, what's the annual revenue into this fund?
The annual revenue right now is about 890,000. We expect 890,000. That should grow by a factor of just under 2% over the
Okay.
coming years.
And then
It's a property tax.
you
based
mentioned
fund.
the Hancock Amendment might come into play. Can you?
So
expand
it's,
that a
it's
little bit?
really, the Hancock Amendment essentially talks about the idea of taxation without need, and if values go up, lowering the tax rates. We're going to talk about it when we talk about the debt tax rate, when we set tax rates. In reality, with this fund, you have a street fund for a purpose that is now going to grow to potentially $4 million at the end of 29, because we really have no major projects planned. That's a potential. Again, there could be projects that bring that down. But you begin to ask that question and people begin to ask us, why are you taxing us to just sit on that kind of money, right? I mean, this is the problem with savings in the government, one-time funds, right? Why do you need my tax money if you've got this big pot of money? And if we, to the mayor's point, we can have plans, but we have to come up with plans sooner or later, because you can't just say it's for this thing down the road, right? There's an extent to which rainy day funds exceed the value of the citizens being willing to be taxed to just fill in savings.
And is this flexible enough? Sorry, I keep trying. Is this flexible enough that it could possibly help cover the cost of like a stormwater culvert or something that if we didn't have enough in stormwater or grant money?
So
Or
yeah.
is that,
Yeah, the projects would have to be looked at based on the revenue, the language that we passed in.
but
the-
if part of them involve the
Exactly,
streets,
the
then.
revenue,
possibly
yeah.
could, okay.
Definitely would have to have a street component,
But let's name names. The Gore Culvert is what we're,
Yeah.
right, looking for funding for at
Sure.
this point.
Yeah, and we're using some of the stormwater funds
Yeah.
for the master plan, which is totally appropriate. And we're hoping to get grant funding, so hopefully we wouldn't
Right.
need it anyway, but I'm just kind of seeing what the possibilities are.
If you all looked at the capital fund, the other one that is out there is the South Elm Road Diet. That's a $2 million grant with a $1 million local, the Crossroads Streetscape. Should that 390 come out of capital or the street fund? So.
Well, and the road diet right now comes out of the SIP, the capital improvement
capital fund,
sales tax,
right.
as opposed to, yeah,
Exactly.
okay.
So
Then we're talking 193,000, not
Right.
the
all of it.
890,000 that's going in.
That's why I asked what the annual revenue is, because it's, 25% or something.
Anybody else have comments? All right, I think we are ready to vote then.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
No.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
No. The
Fine.
amendment passes. Amendment Street -1 is adopted. All right. Mr. Smith, Councilmember Smith, got one more to go here, huh?
Great. Amendment number, well, I guess if I can motion first.
If you wouldn't mind. Thank you, sir.
I'd like to make a motion for approval amendment number PIF-1.
Second.
All right, please go right ahead.
Yeah, so this amendment is similar to our last amendment to approve, except this is involving the park improvement funds. So Eric, will you give us an over?
Certainly.
Of the same.
So there's two parts of this amendment. The first is 290,000 some odd dollars in savings to the general fund from moving 4 staff, full-time employees, to the park improvement fund from the general fund. There are already other staff involved in that fund. You can find that always if you need on the personnel summary in the book. It's page 90. The second piece is Councilmember Smith's intent to sort of balance the spend for this year is to delay $283,000 of capital fund, capital projects to the next year. I think council members intending for the park bond, should the council decide to put a bond together for large, an aggregate park expenditure, let me put it that way. So those are the two functions, and I'm happy to answer questions or go over the fund balances you wish.
Yeah, I have a vision that when we go out for a bond for the pool parks, we're probably gonna look at everything that's out there in our budget book that needs to be done and put it all in that one bond based on the dollar amount we are allowable for that bond. It was a win-win for as the park and aquatic center, that there'll be no more CIP issues for quite a few years if we put it all in the general bond. So the same thing with the this savings that we transfer some of the employees, the full-time employees over to and pay them out of the park improvement fund. Eric, will you go through?
Certainly. So the park improvement fund, let me actually go to the visualization because this helps a lot. So this is the chart here. This is our revenue line. Park fund is a sales tax. These are the expenses we have right now. Obviously, there's a deficit issue here. That really comes from, and I think Councilmember Smith's intent here is the council moving in the future years, those capital items that are currently scheduled in the park improvement fund, which are these items down here, into that park bond, right? And so if you do that, that deficit issue begins to solve itself and reduce itself and take, off of that issue for the park fund. But unlike the street fund, this one certainly has a different fund balance issue to deal with. Now, that said, it is a strong fund balance. We anticipate opening this year at 1.5. This includes the move of the people and the reduction of capital, looking out, through 29, looking at, ending 29 at about 600,000. So certainly using fund balance year over year for some of those costs. If the park bond was not done and you kept the park improvement fund capital items in the park improvement fund, obviously we do have an issue in 27 with the park fund balance that we'll need to address. I think Councilmember Smith's intent, as he explained it to me, was, move this now, if the bond doesn't happen, or if the election goes south or such, or if you decide differently, we move people back. But again, this was I believe his attempt at a general fund smoothing measure for this year and potentially forward for some years.
What's the year for the bond? I know we've talked about it.
It'd be the fiscal year 25 fiscal year,
Okay.
even though it's a 24 election. So it'd be in this year here. So Councilmember Smith's amendment leaves this 90,000, which is a revenue generating item in this year's budget, the ice room, locker room renovations, but the rest of these would go over to 25. Obviously, a future decision of council whether or not to bond for those items.
Wait a minute, could you say that again? Just
Sure.
so line number 22 through,
23 right there. So the
Yeah.
parks,
so that
Parks-
stays in this?
nope, these
Only the
right
90.
here go to this year under his amendment.
Only the locker room vendors.
That's correct.
I can't say that word. Yes.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Also, in the listing that you have, if you look at the back page of the amendment, you'll see them listed out. If you look up with me at this 123 number in capital, there was couple ivory crockett items that didn't get separate pages in the SIP documents. That's in that
Okay.
bucket of line there. So we've added that reduction into this fund balance calculation for you. So
Go ahead.
And I was gonna
Yes.
say, with all of the budget adjustments, even including this one, we'll be seeing $347,895 to the good on the general fund.
So if no one objects, Parks and Rec Director Davis is here.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. We're going to put you on the spot. If you have any comments, general comments, and then I'd like to know specifically if any of those that might be postponed, do you feel like are really needed in this fiscal year?
Thank you. There are a few of those that would be helpful to get sooner than, really if we're talking bond issue, then you're throwing another year out before it finally gets bid out and we get the money and get it done.
Define helpful and needed for me.
What's that?
Define helpful.
Landscape trailer, we need, the ones we have, we need another one so we can haul more equipment around to the parks to mow grass and things of that nature. Volleyball standards, we can hold the four. Barnacle Park crack fill really ought to be done. That's an upkeep and maintenance type of action. The longer you let that go, the worse it'll get. Sinks at Blackburn and Larson, I think we'll probably be into some hefty repair bills if we don't replace them in the next couple of years on that one. The ice rink lights can hold, the ice rink roller curtains can hold, the Larson Park bottle filler can hold, the Ivory Crockett lights and sign can hold. Picnic tables, some of them are starting to get in pretty bad shape. My plan was to do 2 years, do half this year and half next year. Some of those will need to be replaced probably prior to 3 to 4 years down. So, but it could be a lesser amount than the 24,000 that's in this year's proposed budget.
Or either put them in if we go out for a bond, put all of those items in part of the.
Yeah, they would go in the bond, but the bond's still more than a year out. And then by the time we get the actual bond funds and turn around and do RFPs on those, it'll be another.
And we haven't decided
Wow,
what we
wow.
want to go out to bond for, or we haven't decided to do.
And it also assumes the bond passes.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's some big assumptions there.
Do you, Scott, have just in terms of the movement of staff into the park improvement fund, do you have any comment on that portion of the amendment?
I have the same concerns that you brought up earlier, that if they get moved, they'll likely never move back. We've already moved several over the last couple of years. I moved a bunch this year myself, suggested moving over there. It's getting heavy over there. We're doubling the amount of staff costs than we were a couple of years ago in the park fund. So if the bond doesn't pass, historically, a lot of those funds that we're going to be using for staff have been used for park improvements or capital projects and stuff. So at some point down the road, and it's not today, but at some point down the road, we'll have another hard decision on where do we come up with those funds to make those needed park improvements when playgrounds age out and whatever.
What is our standard balance in that fund?
It's well over $1 million as of today. Yes.
And it'll be $1 million next year?
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's a rolling pool of funds going into that park fund every year.
Right.
But it's still projected to be negative in the out years, right? Isn't that what we looked at? With the capital, like,
With the capital.
if we don't do a bond or it doesn't pass,
With the staff.
knowing what we know right now, it would be negative, yeah. I mean, and we can talk about amendments and stuff. Personally, I would rather not move the staff over because we had this conversation last year and you were like, if we keep doing this, we're not gonna be able to do the things we want to do in the parks. So I am reluctant to move staff over. And I would want to carve out the things that you say need to be done sooner and delay the things that can, easily wait. That's kind of just where I am.
Yeah. My issue is that we have over $1 million sitting there doing what?
Let's
I'm just.
let others.
Couldn't you say the same thing about our reserve fund? I mean, for years, I remember when we first got on council 5 years ago, we were like, what's all this money doing there? And
Well-
thank goodness we had the money, because now we were in a pickle and we didn't realize it. But,
Well, you have to remember too, that, that balance in the budget with the old administration was moving money out of the reserve. That was a deficit balance.
that's what we're
I'm not
doing
sure,
here.
I'm not sure how different that is from this. We're moving it from one fund to another to balance the general fund.
It's, I would say it's significantly different because that reserve is what it's supposed to be, a reserve, not to.
But we're essentially taking it out of a particular reserve to go to the general fund. This is a park improvement reserve.
I wouldn't call it a reserve. I would call it a fund. And that's what it is. It's resources that we have in the city that we should use for park and rec, and park and rec includes staff.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think my difference of opinion is in this, certainly with this fund compared to the street fund. The balance on this one fluctuates a lot more based on big projects that we have over time. We still haven't done the park at what is it, Big Bend and the Great Rivers Greenway, McDonald's lot that I will get another call this week, I'm sure, about how terrible it looks. And it's true. And so this one makes me even a little more nervous, to be honest, than the other one, just because this is part of what people love most about our community is our parks.
Well, even taking out like things that you say could wait, like the ice rink improvements or add-ons, whatever they are. But that's like our biggest moneymaker in the department. So, I mean, it seems like to not like kind of put some of that money back into the ice rink also doesn't feel right to me. I would like to leave the budget the way that Scott set the budget and not do this. But I understand the thinking behind it, and I voted for the street one, but I think this is going a little too far for me.
I also, from a philosophical standpoint, from local government, like I think bonds should be used for big things and not little things. And I'm not saying that these are little things, but things that taxpayers expect to be done. Replacing the lights seems like number one. It's like, I don't know. I'd rather I guess I just look at a bond as a bond should be used for a major investment in the community, like a new pool versus replacing lights. And I I want to keep that distinction, I guess, in my own head.
Yeah. And my thing is just the bond will give us the opportunity to do it, everything at one time.
And hey, I'm all for that. I get it. I mean, it makes sense to me, Emerson. But I don't want this city or any municipal government for that matter to be beholden to passing a bond in order to get the basic infrastructure of your parks and rec accomplished.
All right, do we have any additional comments? All right, so we will vote on the amendment as it is written. Please
Councilmember
go
Smith,
ahead.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
No.
Councilmember Richardson,
No.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
No.
Councilmember Bliss,
No.
Councilmember Franklin,
No.
Mayor Arnold.
No. All right, so this amendment does not carry. We've come to the end of our submitted amendments. Is there any member of the council who has any other amendment they would like to make to the budget? We do have the opportunity at our next meeting to do so if people so choose. I think since it's our last one, if you intend to do that, the earlier you could let people know, the better, just so we can make sure that we have a fully adopted budget at the end of that meeting.
Emerson, I really appreciate the ingenuity that you've done.
Yeah, I do too. And
appreciate
My-
creativity.
Me looking at finances,
It's
looking
done.
at the budget book that I
Yeah.
did, I just looked where our resources are and how we
Yeah.
can better use those resources.
and I,
Having pots of millions of dollars sitting over here just, if the state's growing year after year, just don't seem feasible.
well, and I will say, my intention is to have us have a discussion, or at least present the idea of a discussion about revisiting our reserve policy. We've just made it through the biggest financial disaster for municipal government and essentially have used a minuscule amount of our reserve, which means we are holding on to the taxpayers' money. And so I share that particular perspective with you.
I'm sure they'd
Absolutely.
rather for us to put it back into the community.
Yeah, I agree.
And we got, well, with the street fund, with the park fund, we got $2-3 million just sitting.
Well,
there.
you got us part of the way there, Emerson. You got us part of the way there.
Mayor Arnold, I just have one quick note for you all. I put it up on the screen, but you have successfully moved us to a surplus for this year budget of $56,941.
Our job here is done.
Well,
No. Oh, well, see, so this year, we still have to solve for a deficit budget. We still must find additional revenues. I'm sure I shared it with Mayor and maybe some of you, I don't want to do it on the back of employees. We need to do what we need to do to get revenue and decrease expenses that's not related to staff.
Sorry, I don't want to do it on the back of employees either, but in doing research about this city, going back to the 90s, we've had effectively the same number of employees as we currently do today. And so there has to be some efficiency built in somewhere that we have failed to account for.
Yeah.
So I don't want to do it on the backs of employees, but I do want an efficient city. So I think there's a balance there.
and I
also
think,
just recognizing that staff costs are the largest portion of so it's very difficult to reduce expenses and not touch staffing just because of the way our budget is. Not that I want to do that, but just the
Yeah.
reality is that's
And,
the largest piece of our budget.
yes, that's correct.
I think that this is one of those cases where multiple people are quote unquote right here. We still have work to do in the long term. We absolutely do, but let's take a moment and appreciate where we are in this particular budget year, and especially say thank you to our department heads, our
Yes.
chiefs, our directors, our finance director and assistant city manager, our city manager, because, we're going to vote on this in 2 weeks, but this is a lot of hard work from a lot of other people. So thank you all for that.
Months. Yes, thank you.
All right, I believe we have,
Madam Mayor, sorry, I have one final quick thing.
I thought you already did your final thing.
It just came up. I thought Marie was going to do it, but she wasn't popping up. If you do have amendments next week, we won't be able to do them on the fly to get the right numbers. So if you
Yeah.
really want something to do an amendment on, please connect with me so we can get it calculated for you prior to the meeting. So.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Yes,
Eric. I
thank
failed
you.
Thank you.
What Eric is really saying is we will all be running around with our hair on fire if you give us less. So,
Okay, I need someone, perhaps it would be Councilmember Richardson to call for the approval of the consent agenda, please.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second,
Is it, I forgot to ask, is there anything to be removed now that we've already made the motion? There is not. All right, let's have the vote.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yeah.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
yes.
Well, I can't find my paper, but we have made 2 appointments to the library board. Janie Worthington is going to continue in a second term, and Dana Cooley has been newly appointed to the library board. We are going to have a closed session. You want to use that?
1 and 4.
I would like to call for an executive closed session related to attorney-client privilege communication for the statute 610.021 open friends, 1 closed friends, and negotiated contract, Missouri statute 610.021 open friends, 12 closed friends.
Do I have a second?
Second. Sorry.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all for being with us to this evening.
Okay.